and it's in the breaking we come unbound. And it's in the giving we are found. Yeah, you could barely change.
Welcome to A Medicinal Mind, Wisdom and Wellbeing, a podcast dedicated to the telling of authentic stories and the sharing of insightful wisdom, exploring science and spirituality, medicine and Mother Nature. No topic is off limits when it comes to growing our personal understanding and supporting our collective well-being. With your host, Dr. Rob Abbott, a family medicine resident practicing spiritually focused and evolutionarily informed functional medicine, we hope to nourish your being so that you can flourish in whatever the moment has called for you to do.
And I know you tried.
In episode 12 of A Medicinal Mind, Wisdom and Wellbeing, we enter into the world of positive psychology with my new friend and visionary researcher, Grace Cormier. While Grace's bio may appear linear, straightforward, and precisely planned, the actual story, as you will hear in the podcast, is much more circuitous, yet blessed by courageous leaps of faith. Grace graduated from Carleton College with a BA in psychology and from the University of Pennsylvania with a Master of Applied Positive Psychology. She has extensive experience implementing positive psychology and resilience programs in a wide variety of organizations, including the military, public safety, universities, and even a professional basketball team. Her academic work focuses on how to foster effective commitment through building cultures that support autonomy, competence, and relatedness. She has a passion for applying positive psychology in organizations to transform cultures, build effective teams, and encourage prosocial behavior. She currently does research with Wharton People Analytics at the University of Pennsylvania. In the episode, Grace and I hold a joyful conversation, sharing aspects of our life stories and how we both came to study and practice in the field of positive psychology in the first place. To get things started, Grace shares with us a short history of positive psychology. What is it exactly? What are the main principles of positive psychology? How about practices? And why are we even calling it positive psychology in the first place? Digging back into the personal, we explore the many ways in which Grace has incorporated positive psychology practices into her daily life. What are some of the most practical skills and applications? How can I start today by cultivating a greater sense of gratitude? Building from these practices, Grace shares some amazing insights on the power and influence of self-talk, how we can view setbacks or roadblocks as areas and opportunities for growth, and how we can reframe our perspective in any situation and become learned optimists. Following our journey into the practices of positive psychology, we then transition to a fascinating discussion about the importance of gratitude and the concept of resilience. What do we mean exactly when we say resilience? How can one cultivate resilience? And what specific practices from positive psychology seem to be the most helpful in making one more resilient in the face of significant stress? And lastly, we close with some final insights and a beautiful piece of wisdom from Grace as she faithfully lives out the practices she most rigorously studies. I was so grateful to have shared this conversation with Grace, and so thankful for the nourishing friendship that emerged from our synchronous connection. I am already looking forward to bringing Grace back on the show to to share more of her insights, wisdom, and passion for connecting communities by holding a space for happiness to flourish. I really hope you enjoy the show. Well, Grace, thank you for joining me today for a conversation. I am just so happy and blessed to have connected with you, and perhaps we'll get into how we actually got to know each other. But first, just let people know a little bit about your life and who you are.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited to be on the podcast and happy that our paths cross. But I am currently working at Wharton's People Analytics initiative, doing research there. And basically, what we try to do is we try to apply data to making decisions about people at work. And a lot of the theory that we pull from is actually positive psychology. So I'm excited to talk to you about positive psychology and what it is and how to apply it.
Wonderful. Yeah. We say the words positive psychology, and I sort of sit there like, do we have to say positive? Like, wouldn't psychology just be like imply positive? But
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, no, it's really funny that you say that, because that's actually been something that I've talked to a lot of people about in the field of positive psychology, right? Where like, is it really positive, or are we just studying like natural processes, that humans engage in? But I think that the reason why positive psychology, I guess we include the term positive, is I think it's because, it was really like a departure from traditional ways of approaching and studying psychology. So there is this guy named Marty Seligman, or Martin Seligman. People call him Marty kind of affectionately, but he was from the University of Pennsylvania, and he, in the 1970s, really wanted to break away from the traditional, approach that clinical psychology takes, and in psychiatry for that matter. So, looking at how do we treat depression, how do we treat anxiety, and he was saying, well, why aren't we looking at like what's good about life and how people lead a life of well-being? And so I think that's kind of how the term positive came to be added to the word psychology, and then you got positive psychology.
Yeah. Well, it's, it's the same sort of, I apply it in my mind too, I'm very much interested in sort of functional medicine, or this root cause approach to medicine. And to some people, it's like, well, that should just be medicine. Why do we even need the word, functional? And it's kind of just acts as a clarifier, and it's a kind of just descriptor, and we'll certainly get into more of the nuts and bolts of what positive psychology really means and some of the practices. But I guess it just, I sort of just keep thinking about making sure we never attach to labels, or we try to avoid potentially dogma by just, attaching to descriptions and needing to see that, it's just like, we're just people, right? We're just happy, engaged people for the most part. And how can we promote that? And sometimes we just get lost in, these words, or we invent something and then we name it something, and then we feel like we have to promote all aspects of it. And it's like, well, this is humanity, or it's just psychology, right? Or it's just a way of being.
Right. It's funny how the titles that you think are going to help to clarify can sometimes cause confusion for people. So yeah, I totally see that.
Well, wonderful. Yeah. So Grace, we've been throwing out this term, and you gave us a great beginning background to understand, what is positive psychology. And I guess it's really what brought us together. To tell the story briefly, was listening to a podcast, one of my favorites, On Being by Krista Tippett, and she had Adam Grant on, and was talking about sort of his collaborative new book, really looking at resilience and getting through major life trauma. In this specific case, traumatic death, and just being able to see what do we need to cultivate resilience, and really coming from a positive kind of psychological perspective. And I actually, of course, find them on the internet. I'm like, I'll just send an email. And, of course, I'm like, there's no way I'm going to, get in contact with this guy. And no joke, it's like 2 days later, he sends me a paragraph response and, very honest about it. It's like, yeah, obviously I just released this book. I've been overwhelmed with work and, hope you understand, but here are a couple of colleagues. And that, one of the colleagues was you. And, and you immediately responded, and it just like set off this chain of amazing new connections. And I was like, I need to have you on to share some of your work and the application of your work, and just to bring this great, understanding of positive psychology to a greater audience, because it does not just belong in the psychological or academic world. It is so applicable to our life. So, perhaps you could give us a little glimpse as to what drew you to even study positive psychology, or what was your childhood like? Even did that play a role, or what was your journey to get to this point?
Yeah. No, it's funny. Before I dive into my story, I think just really quickly want to say that when so many people are so surprised that Adam is so responsive over email, and they often say like, "Oh, he's restored my faith in humanity," just by the fact that he's crazy busy and he still takes the time to respond to people's emails and foster connection. So he's the real deal.
And it inspires me.
I know.
Nowhere near his busy, but I want to be like him.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. He's an inspiration for us all. But anyway, I kind of have an interesting path to kind of finding my place in positive psychology. But my first kind of foray into the field was in between my junior and senior years in college. I did a study abroad program in Copenhagen, Denmark, in positive psychology. And so what we did is we spent 3 weeks learning about the field, and then going to different places to see how it was applied and how organizations were applying it. And I had just an amazing time learning about positive psychology. And I think the reason why it was in Denmark was because Denmark is traditionally one of the happiest countries. And so they felt that was an appropriate place to study positive psychology. And I thought, hey, why not? But anyway, I came back and I knew that I wanted to apply positive psychology in whatever I did moving forward, but I didn't really know that there was a field of positive psychology, right, that you could dedicate your career toward. So it wasn't until my college's psychology department actually emailed out open positions across the United States, and one of them happened to be a position at Marty Seligman's Positive Psychology Center at Penn, working on resilience training programs. And so I applied to the job, and I happened to get it, and spent the past 4 years working there on the resilience training programs, and in the process got my master's degree in applied positive psychology from Penn. So it's kind of, I wish I could say, I had this, goal to be in positive psychology since I was a kid, but it really kind of happened in a random chain of events that brought me here to Penn and to this amazing group of researchers and practitioners who want to bring this work out into the world.
Wow, it's kind of amazing to think you end up in sort of the Mecca with the father of positive psychology, sort of completely by accident.
Yes.
Doing work that you didn't even know it was a real field. It's like, this just seems right.
Yes.
This feels right.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you say that, because I had spent 2 years at Penn knowing about the master's in applied positive psychology, and kind of thinking about it on the back of my mind and talking to a lot of graduates, but I didn't actually apply until a week before the application deadline, 2 years after I had found out about it, because I was, taking a walk through Philadelphia and thought, what am I doing? This is out there, and this is something that I want to dedicate my life towards, or life to. And I kind of had that stroke of this is right, and I need to do it. So it has been very much so that feeling throughout the process.
I mean, it's fascinating to me. I think about it, and I don't want to get too abstract for people, but I really feel in the nature of kind of answering that call, or really stepping into that calling, what it is that you're here to do. We're drawn energetically to different areas. I mean, I know in my life, just being drawn to the Charlottesville region and just kind of the Valley Mountain region, Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, and the people that I meet, it's just like, you were here, you came here, and then hearing their stories of how they ended up there. And it's just beyond coincidence. It's such these synchronicities of people, but I feel like there's these energetic centers that call people to them. And it's, your story sounds so similar. It's like, you didn't go there to be with Martin Seligman because you knew he was I want to go to Stanford because I know it's the best program. I want to go here because I know it's the best. You're just like, it just kind of was where you ended up, and from a very authentic, this is what's important to me place. And then you get there and find out, oh wow, like I'm in this incredibly nourishing, flourishing place. And I think we need to share that message with our generation, the young generations, because we get so caught up in the academic institutional hierarchy of things. And I need to do X, Y, Z in order to get to this school, or someone told me this is where I'm supposed to go because it's the best, or this magazine ranked these as the best. And it's like, just be free with yourself, be authentic with yourself. Like, create some stillness to see what's important in your life and see where that takes you. Maybe be a little bit of that butterfly and just kind of like sample around, see where you're going to be, like, sample from these flowers, but don't just go after something because someone else told you that was the best place to be. And
no, I'm so happy that you're going there, because just as you were talking, I was like, oh, I want to talk about how that's so different from what our culture tells us that we need to do, right? From a very young age, we're given a rule book. These are the 3 things that lead to success. And if you do these things, and even happiness, right? So like, these are the 3 things that lead to happiness. And that if you do these 3 things, you'll be happy. And everybody's so caught up, right, in doing the 3 things that they think are going to lead to some endpoint that they forget to listen to the voice inside of them, and they forget to stop and say, is that something that I really want? Like, how does that align with my values, and how does that align with the person that I want to be and be in this world and relate to other people? So I think, it's really important that, the millennial generation, the generation that's coming after us, just really tries to stop and think about, what do I want in my life, and how do I want to give back, and who do I want to be in this world, and really listens to that voice inside of them and follows it, and has the bravery and the courage to follow that, even if it's going against, the grain.
Yeah, that courage piece is such a difficult place to be. I mean, it's
hard.
It is really hard. I tell my the kids in my church in our youth ministry, these elementary age kids, they surprise me every week. I always tell them, just don't listen necessarily to everything that you see on TV. And actually, if you can, maybe avoid the TV and spend time with your family, your parents, and but create stillness now, because there's going to be so much in your life. I can't even imagine. We have these conversations in my family. It's like the amount of information we're exposed to nowadays it's crazy, and we have to put these filters and barriers in place to keep things from being overwhelmed. And and they get it. They some of them they really do get it, and they're able to sort of together we kind of hold that space at least for an hour each Sunday to kind of, we play, we have fun, but we create a little bit of stillness, and we're like, maybe what's gotten into your life that you don't want to be there, or where do you really see, like, where do you want to go? And I bring it back to something you said at the very beginning, that word happiness, right? I feel like psychology gets so focused on depression or the negative disease states, and now we need to treat the depressed state, or we need to intervene when we notice pathology, but we we forget, like, instead of, doing things to reverse depression, can we do things to promote happiness?
Mm-hmm.
And, hopefully this is kind of a lead into maybe some of these main principles of positive psychology. And you can give us a kind of a background of, what are some of those key principles, and, why such a focus on happiness? Like, what's the purpose?
Yeah. Well, I think it's really interesting what you're saying, because I think that one of the things that Marty realized, right? Like, if we're just going to put this on like a number line, right? Like, maybe the question of, how do you treat depression is, how do you bring somebody from -5 to 0? And that's a fundamentally different question from how do you bring someone from 0 to +5. And that's where, positive psychology comes in, is not only, yes, I think we do still have to pay attention to, how do you treat depression, how do you treat anxiety, but there's this whole other side of life, the 0 to +5 side, that we need to be paying attention to, we need to be studying, and we need to, be helping people to cultivate that. So that's kind of, positive psychology's main mission. But I think, there are so many different theories in positive psychology, and what leads to happiness and what leads to well-being. But, I'll just quickly talk about Marty's theory, because he's kind of the pioneer of the field. But, he kind of breaks down well-being into 5 different categories, but they're growing. So basically he says, in order to lead a happy life, a fulfilled life, you need to have a good dose of positive emotion. You need to have a good dose of engagement in the activities that you're doing. You need to have healthy relationships, so be connected to people and feel like you have strong, abiding relationships. You need to have meaning, right? So it's not just all about, do I feel good in this moment, but to what extent is my life full of meaning? You need to have accomplishment. And that's actually one that's kind of hotly debated in the field. And a lot of people feel like, I don't know, do I need to have accomplishment? But how I kind of feel about accomplishment is like, I need to have a sense of mastery and control over my life, right? Like I need to feel like I can, my actions in the world lead to outcomes, lead to objective outcomes. And then recently there's been this push to, think about health and vitality, right? And how does that contribute to leading a meaningful and fulfilled life? So those are kind of, the main pillars of, what someone might call well-being. And then kind of within each pillar, there's robust research to kind of tease out maybe the mechanisms by which someone would experience positive emotion, and kind of how does that lead to healthy outcomes, good outcomes for people. So yeah, that's kind of positive psychology or well-being in a nutshell.
There's so much I want to unpack there.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I love it. I was just sitting here, like, the way my mind, I do categorize, but I also put things in conceptual frameworks. And
Totally.
I loved hearing that. And in my mind, I'm sitting here thinking, there's engagement, there's emotion, there's, energy, vitality, there's service, there's connection, there's meaning, there's community. There's all these aspects that, interconnect. And, we can certainly, the traditional medicine perspective is like, well, let me try to isolate each of these and see how they contribute. And it's like, well, that's just not that's not how it's going to work. Like, they're all interrelated and they all support each other. And, but it brings this great picture of how we can foster well-being, and actually maybe the physical, energetic, the physical body side is really just one small piece. And, if we put our energy into, what kind of relationships do you have, like you said, or, can you describe any positive emotions in your life, or do you feel your work is meaningful? And do you see growth? I mean, I feel like that mastery element, like, am I growing? Am I getting, better at something? And I think, everyone would agree, like, that's kind of, you're in school and you start doing math problems, and you can't figure out a certain math problem, and you keep working on it for a month, and you feel like you don't get any better. It's real easy to say, I want to give up, because we want that sense of mastery. We want that a sense of at least growth. And I guess I've resonated with Carol Dweck's concept of the growth mindset. I'm sure very, very familiar, but it's rather than seeing like this comparison game or like the end goal of I need to be this, have this degree of mastery. Let me just assess where I am and then, see those baby steps and see, get feedback from my mistakes or where I don't do as well as areas for growth. And I think we could really benefit from having, adopting that mindset and applying that to that concept of mastery, because we all want to just be like the expert overnight. And the reality is it's just not how life works. And so I maybe would love to get your thoughts of that. Like you said, it's kind of hotly debated, this sort of accomplishment mastery. Like, maybe we can play with a little bit of fire here, but what are your thoughts on, that growth mindset and the concept of growth and maybe how it interplays with, needing to feel, you have some mastery of a subject or profession and, seeking accomplishment?
Yeah. No, I think it's really interesting. I love the growth mindset. And we incorporate that a lot into the work that we did in our resilience training programs. And I know that Angela Duckworth talks a lot about the growth mindset when she talks about grit, right? Like if you're kind of have this passion and perseverance for long-term goals, you need to definitely have a growth mindset, because along the way, you're totally going to come up against roadblocks where you don't know what you're doing. And if you have a fixed mindset, you're going to probably fail, and you're not going to think about, okay, what can I do? What can I learn? How can I grow from this in order to reach my goal? But I think for me, I feel like what's so interesting about Carol Dweck's work is, just the power of changing your beliefs and your perspective around, a failure experience, where this failure doesn't mean that, or even just coming up with this roadblock doesn't mean that I'm an incapable person. It doesn't mean that, I'm not smart. It just means that I need to put in a little bit more effort and I need to learn in order to reach my goal. So sometimes I feel like, we get into this habit of thinking about things in such black and white terms, right? It's all or none, maybe. A different way we can talk about it.
I'm a spectrum guy.
Yeah,
spectrum.
I know, right? And there's so much gray in the world. And so I think that just this concept, and then there's also, there's labeling, right? Like that kind of goes along with that. So quickly, I come up against this roadblock, or, I fail my first test and I'm stupid, right? Like there's these immediate labels that come kind of.
I'm not a math person.
Totally.
Like, I hate hearing that.
Totally.
Like, no.
Right.
Stop. Get that language out of here.
Exactly. And I think that, the beauty of Carol Dweck's work is just that, there's so much hope in it, like this isn't a permanent thing that's a part of my life, that this is something that I can grow and develop, and I think that when we say the word accomplishment too, I think that we immediately think, oh, school, right? But I think that there's other ways, and part of how I feel like to some extent maybe quiet the debate around the need for accomplishment is that I think accomplishment is a very broad word, right? Like I could think of accomplishment and I'm going to go run like a 5K race when I, am not a runner, and kind of adopting a growth mindset along the path of kind of reaching that goal of running a 5K and then doing it, like that could bring me a huge sense of mastery, or learning, just like a basic new skill, like, oh, I want to learn how to code, or I want to learn how to draw. I think that, we can take a more broad perspective of what it means to have accomplishment and mastery. And I think that kind of helps to kind of cool the debate around, okay, well, if we're saying accomplishment is important to well-being and I'm not, the CEO of X company, or I'm not, the head physician at this hospital, that then, we can kind of have a more nuanced perspective of what it means to have accomplishment and mastery in our lives.
Yeah, I've kind of adopted this framework as well with much of my life. And I see it as, what can I have be a byproduct of my engagement? Like happiness can be a byproduct. Accomplishment can actually be a byproduct. I don't have to seek it for the sake of like just simply feeling accomplished about something. Like maybe if I engage myself in a process in my work that I really truly enjoy, I'll begin to notice 6 months, a year down the line, someone comes up like, look at, gives you this accolade, or gives you this award, or recognizes you for your work, and you're like, wow, I didn't even realize I did all those things, or like that. And when you pour yourself into the process, accomplishment can just be a byproduct. And we need to maybe step back. Like, I don't need to seek something for the sake of that title, or for the sake of just being in that position. And it's not about not having dreams, goals. Like, yes, be dedicated, have a clear goal, but don't have that be the end result.
Yeah. No, I think, and this might be a slight tangent, but I think what you're saying, right, is that like the experience of accomplishment or the experience of praise almost makes you think about yourself differently, right? Like you kind of have that like outward acknowledgement that then you can kind of use to maybe do a little bit of identity work. And it kind of reminds me, there's this work that comes out of the University of Michigan. They have a kind of like the University of Pennsylvania, they have another kind of group of researchers who are really interested in positive psychology, and actually they have kind of a focus of applying positive psychology in organizations. But they have this reflected best self exercise, and what that kind of involves is that, like, okay, Rob, you would say, you would email 3 friends, colleagues, teachers, etc., and you would say, can you tell me a time when you saw me at my best, right? And then you would hear all of their stories, and what we find that helps to do is that helps for Rob to think about himself differently. So a teacher might say, oh, you did a really good job on this test. You got an A. I saw you working really hard. And I know it was really hard for you to kind of wrestle with those concepts. And you would hear that and you might say to yourself, oh, wow, I didn't really think of myself as a hard worker. Or I didn't really think of myself as smart. But that this person has acknowledged that in you kind of helps you reframe who you are, and kind of give you a greater sense of feeling mastery and accomplishment in your life. And so I think that for some reason what you were saying earlier, and that kind of, there are different byproducts of accomplishing things. I think reflecting on those things and thinking about what that means for who you are, and what skill set you have, and kind of what your strengths are, it can kind of shift, that story that you're telling yourself a little bit.
No, seriously, I mean, reframing, I'm glad you brought this up, and we can use this as a preface. I'd love to get some more. You brought up one very practical, amazing practice within positive psychology, this reflective, sort of reflected best self. And I want to get into those some more, but that concept of reframing is so wonderful. And you brought up in my mind actually a different way of using this tool. And I traditionally use it in my own life and with others as a way to kind of like, it's all internal. So reframing our internal dialogue. What are those thoughts that you were having? And perhaps from a CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, perspective, let's analyze the content of them and maybe reframe them and see, like, look, that didn't, that really wasn't true. Like what you said about yourself, that you're a really bad person. Like let's reframe that, or question it. But it starts from like an internal dialogue. But you bring up this wonderful piece that reframing can be created from external sources, right? We can gather information from our peers, from our social environment, from our family, and use their input to help reframe our sense of self, who we believe ourselves to be. And that's really powerful. I mean, it can go both ways, right? It can certainly be, you can use, if you're surrounded by very negative influences and you take what they're telling you and you take that into your being, that can be really negative outcomes.
Right.
But as you describe it, we can take those close around us, take their sort of views, their opinions, their thoughts about our work, and within their own context of their own values, and see how we can change our own perspective. And those are two very powerful practices that I think I know my own life have been incredibly important, especially in medical training when you're always surrounded by peers that are evaluating you, or it's really easy to do the negative self-talk. And then someone tells you, like, you did a really wonderful job on that presentation. You're like, I thought it was terrible, but thank you. I probably need to look at that differently.
Right.
And so I don't know if there's any more on that specific topic or that practice you'd want to describe, but I'd love to maybe dig into some more of these practical practices within positive psychology, such as this reflective sort of reframing practice that you have found to be the most beneficial and maybe the most applicable to most people.
Yeah. Well, I think just one really quick thing before I kind of build off of what you just said, because there's so much greatness in there. But I think, we oftentimes, and especially in organizations, I mean, my interest is in, applying positive psychology in organizations. But I think just across the board, right? Like, we're so quick to give people negative feedback, right? And like, what are the things that you're doing wrong and how to fix it, right? But, in the vein of positive psychology, thinking about how much impact really it could have on someone to tell them what they're doing right. And there's this other work that's called, it's affective praise, and it's actually Shelley Gable does a lot of work on affective praise, and that, she kind of talks about giving affective praise is telling someone what they did right so that they can then replicate that, right? And they can have more mastery experiences. So saying, not, hey, you got an A on that test, you did a great job, you're really smart, but saying, you know what, you got an A on that test because you worked really hard. You studied day in and day out, and you reread your lecture notes, and you talked to your friends about concepts that you weren't understanding. Right, so that I know that the next time I have a test, that I can use the same strategies that I used before to get another good grade. So I think that's kind of probably part of what's going on with that reflected self-exercise. But I kind of want to, for a second, if we're talking about more practical strategies, which I think are awesome. You were talking earlier about reframing and perspective taking, and that's what's kind of like at the center of Marty's work on learned optimism, right? So that, and I think a practical strategy that people can kind of tune into is like, what is your self-talk, right? Like when I come up against a roadblock, like, what am I telling myself about that roadblock? And I think that, Adam kind of took Marty's theory of learned optimism, and in his new book, Option B, kind of talks about, okay, there are 3 Ps that kind of underlie what it means to be resilient or what it means to be optimistic. And that those are personalization, right? So am I blaming myself for a setback, or am I saying that, there's a lot of different situations and things that kind of went into this roadblock arising? Pervasiveness. So am I thinking that this setback or this roadblock is going to affect all areas of my life, or is it kind of like more specific and contained to this one situation? And then permanence. So am I thinking that this setback is going to last forever, and kind of be my final fatal blow, or am I thinking, hey, like this it's temporary, it's just going to be something that's in my life for a contained period of time, and that I'm going to be able to eventually kind of surpass this roadblock. So I think that the extent to which people can kind of tune into what I'm telling myself and kind of how they're explaining things along those 3 Ps, personalization, pervasiveness, and permanence, and really make an effort to kind of not be so black and white in your thinking, and think about, a different perspective you can take, or a different way to look at it. I think that's so vital, to leading a life of well-being.
I love those 3 Ps. The perspective.
They're super handy.
Really, no. I mean, people joke like, "Oh, it's just another silly mnemonic," and it's really, it can be really helpful to remember. And that element of permanence, I feel we are always so quick. Like, man, this is. I mean, I laugh at having a conversation with my good friend about high school, and we go back and think about the things that you worried about in high school. That if you thought about it from the permanence piece, you're like, this is happening once right now, and it's actually already done with. but I'm still worried about it. And we're just sitting here laughing, like, but even as adults, we can get caught up in like, look, this event already happened, this and it's not going to continue happening. Let me reframe my perspective and see how I can move beyond this. And we always think it's the end of the world, or something is going to be last for the rest of our lives. And so I love that concept of acknowledging permanence where there's permanence, and acknowledging impermanence when there's impermanence. And I don't know. I just thought it was funny. I was literally having that conversation about just those silly things in high school, and I couldn't take that other perspective. We couldn't take it. You're so absorbed in the the teenager social sphere that you couldn't take that perspective. And
and I think,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I think, like I keep the 3 Ps in my pocket, and I also I take them out when I hear that kind of talk in my friends, right? So this guy didn't text me back, or my boss, they wrote into me and it's over, and my job, I'm probably, that's it. I'm probably going to get fired. I'm never going to be able to find another job. And I think it's so helpful for me to be to just pull those out and kind of question, do you really think you're not going to get another job? Let's think about this for a second. How many other things in your life did you feel were the end all be all, and you were going to be done, but that didn't keep you down? And then that kind of gets them to think, oh yeah, you're right. I'm probably I'm catastrophizing right now, is a word we use a lot, where you kind of just have this downward spiral of negative thinking. So it's not only helpful to help reframe, your own perspective, but taking them out when you hear it in your friends and your colleagues, I think is so helpful.
I think that's really our most powerful tool, is being able to, yes, it's important to apply these concepts, these principles, these practices in our own lives. But if we just keep them to ourselves, then what use are they really? I mean, we're all relational beings. And so when we see our friends, our coworkers, colleagues, and see that they're struggling or perhaps suffering, and could benefit from, a little bit of reframing, or could benefit from seeing a different perspective and applying a gratitude practice. We should try to intervene. And it's not always, it's not going to be easy, for sure. It's going to appear incredibly challenging, and the outcome may not be what you wish. But the fact is, if you still have that belief and truly care about that person, you'll want to engage them and bring it up as a question. You don't want to challenge them, but let's bring it up as a curious question. Well, do you really think blah, 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 blah,
right.
And then they're like, oh yeah, you're kind of right. So it's allowing them to see and discover it themselves from, those kind of basic principles.
Yeah. And I think, there's actually, you're making me think of this new research that's come out too, where, you actually offering advice to another person helps to make you feel better, right? So there's this kind of, I feel like, I don't know where we are in terms of the points for benefiting, but right. So there, not only are you benefiting the person by helping them to reframe their perspective, but also you're feeling better, and your problem solving is enhanced by offering someone, but by helping someone work through some things. So oftentimes, some suggestions that people give is when you're dealing with a problem, maybe by yourself, you don't have your friend, kind of to tap on, maybe thinking if let's just take a different perspective. Let me jump outside myself for a second. And if I was my friend, right, what advice would I give to my friend? And you're so much better apt to solve your problems by taking that perspective.
Oh man, I wish we could keep talking forever and ever. I'm realizing now, there's a couple other topics I want to get your thoughts on before we sort of get to the end of our time.
Go there.
One of the things that's, I think, changed my life the most, and it's not just a principle or applied in positive psychology. It's a universal value, but I came to it as a practice through researching within positive psychology. And it's this concept and practice of gratitude. And, I see it fundamentally as being just tremendously thankful for the things that you have, for the people in your life. And, I participated in a research study where we had our patients keep a gratitude journal and engage in that short period of reflection. And we just started, like, there's kind of this idea of three simple things, or three things that you're grateful for, and it can just be three words, like family, friends, my dog, and as simple as that. But I really took this practice to heart and began to not only keep a journal, but see things in the moments when things got hard. It was like a switch went off and said, okay, you need to do a gratitude practice right now. You need to see what you have in your life. What are you most grateful for right now? Because that's what's going to help you out of the situation. Not listening to the self-talk, not listening to those thoughts in your head that are trying to convince you of how to avoid this, but go to the place, go to your heart center, go find that gratitude. And I know it's, like I said, it's been a huge part of my life. And I guess I would love to hear from you perhaps how that practice, those values have been applied within the scope of positive psychology in maybe practical terms, and just more broadly as a value and principle.
Yeah, no, first of all, I love that you are doing this with your patients. We incorporated the 3 blessings exercise into the work that we were doing with the U.S. Army, but we called it Hunt the Good Stuff. So everybody would keep a Hunt the Good Stuff journal. And, kind of to kick off the resilience trainings that we would do every day, we would have people share Hunt the Good Stuffs, and the powerful stories that would come out of people sharing their Hunt the Good Stuff. And it was like, what I think what you're saying too is, it doesn't have to be like, I, accomplished this wonderful, amazing thing, but there were like powerful stories and just like the little things that people would say, like, oh, I saw somebody do something kind on the street yesterday, and that really, really changed my day. It made my day, and it gave me such positive emotion. And I love to hear stories like that, where something so simple has such a profound effect on people. But I think you were saying that I think gratitude, like, you forget to do it, and it's such a simple thing that I think we totally underestimate the power of gratitude in our lives. And I think that, there's so much research around the benefits of gratitude, and a ton of, for our health, for our relationships, for our accomplishment, things like that. So I just think gratitude, it's totally underestimated. And I think that, there isn't enough gratitude in our schools, in our communities, and I think that
I don't think you could ever have a surplus.
I know.
I don't think it's possible.
Right? No, I don't think so either. So I think I'm just so happy to hear that you're applying it in your work with your patients, because I think that there's so much benefit to it.
And you just and sharing your story, it's brings to me this idea, like, this practice can be applied anywhere. Maybe we'll change the language so it resonates more with the military folks, but it's fundamentally the same practice. And I like you talked about carrying the peace in your pocket. I carry gratitude in my heart. I carry it in my pocket. It's just, I don't see it as a tool. I see it as a way of being, but we have to realize we carry these things with us, and it can be so powerful. And the ripple effects of, like you said, just noticing someone else smile at a loved one, within their own family, and how that can impact you. And they'll probably never know that their interaction of sort of joy and love impacted your life. It happens to me all the time in the hospital. And I tried to take ownership of my own energy and walking around. It's like, let me walk around with a smile, just, not a fake one, but let me hold all that joy that I have in my heart, and let me just show it, because you never know who's going to be looking. You never know who you can impact and whose life you can change in that moment, just by simply carrying this positive energy, carrying this optimistic outlook. And one of my best friends, this wonderful gentleman, at UVA and patient transport. It was over 4 years ago, actually, when I was doing the positive psychology research. I used to take breaks after I had finished interviewing a patient, and I'm just beaming because I've just heard them talk about like sometimes even like moved to tears over sharing the things they were most grateful for. And I just walk out and I'm just beaming with joy. And it took about like 2 months, but he finally stopped me one day. He's like, "You are the happiest person in this place. Like, what are you, what are you doing?" Yeah. And that sparked a friendship that has just, to this day been so nourishing. And so that's just a clear example of, look, you can, by cultivating optimism, by showing, your just positive, joyful self, like it'll impact people, and maybe it'll end up in a new, meaningful relationship that otherwise wouldn't have happened. But I get chills talking about it because it's so real to me, and we can make things so practical and so real to others. And I want to spend like just this last piece of time here for you to share just any final kind of thoughts, ideas, projects. And I'm leaving it really open-ended, and perhaps that's a lot of my interviews. They just, people are like, I don't like that question. But really, just any final pieces of wisdom or stories that really just come to your heart right now that you'd like to share with the audience.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny you say people hate that question. As you start to say that, I'm like, oh my God, my heart starts beating more quickly. But it's funny. But I think, one of the things that I would say, just I feel like in some sense kind of captures, how our paths crossed, and how, I hope that, our paths continue to cross, and the work that we're doing is just, and you kept saying, hold space. And I think that I would hold space for a sense of, randomness and beautiful randomness in life to kind of to happen, and to be open to, letting those experiences in and playing with them, and kind of seeing, where they lead, and who they kind of lead you to, and what you learn about yourself along the way.
That was beautiful. Beautiful randomness.
Yes.
That's going to become my next poem. I have this idea of I play in a sandbox of randomness. And
I love it.
It's just, it brings me so much joy. But beautiful randomness. I love it.
That's great.
Well, Grace, before you go, can you let people know how, maybe more specifics about your research, how to follow some of your research, or and how to follow you or get in contact with you? Because I'm sure plenty of people will want to reach out and connect in this space of beautiful randomness. And so.
Yeah, totally. So I think if you're going to follow any of the research on positive psychology, the Positive Psychology Center's website is where to go. And I think you can go to positivepsychology.org to get there. But if not, if you just Google UPenn Positive Psychology Center, and then to follow some of the work that I'm doing at Wharton, you can go to Wharton People Analytics and see some of the cool work that's going on there. And then we also recently launched, the Positive Psychology Center recently launched a positive psychology course on Coursera. So it's one of those massive open online courses. So you can go there, and then the work that I did on resilience training programs is featured in kind of like a specialization course related to that. And then I'm not super active on social media. Actually, I don't have like a personal page or anything like that, but love to connect with people. They can, reach out to me at Cormier G, so CORMIERG at upenn.edu.
Wonderful. I'll have all of those links on our podcast page in the notes, so people can access them and reach out. And I'm sitting here. I would love to have you back on again, and maybe 4-6 months as you continue in your new job with new research, and because there's just so much here. I mean, we could have like 8, 9, 10 podcasts on the subject. And so if you're amenable, I would love to have you back.
Definitely, I would love to be back. I love talking about this stuff.
Wonderful. Well, Thank you again, Grace. I am just honored so blessed to have shared the space with you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. You too.
All right, goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you for your presence and willingness to receive a new narrative, a passionate perspective, and perhaps a deeper sense of connection with our collective purpose. Please share this podcast with any and all that you believe will benefit from its intention to relieve one's doing and engage one's being. Please share your comments about the conversation on our podcast page and leave a review in iTunes so that the voices in this space can spread to all ears ready to receive it. Music credit goes to Dillingham for their song Vessel. Remain open, stay curious, and forever be love.